Hello there, it's Stu here from DIYmusic.co.uk with a very overdue FL Studio tutorial. Sorry about the delay, but about a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, let's get straight to it. This time I'm going to show you how to humanize a piano part that you've programmed. So that is taking a programmed piano part and making it sound more realistic, more natural, and more human-like, which they call humanization. So this is what I'm hoping to show you. Start with something which sounds a bit like this. So that's obviously just been programmed in the piano roll, and we're going to hopefully end up with something that sounds a bit more like this. Okay, and there's a process to doing that. As you can hear, that sounds a lot more like a real person playing a real piano, hopefully. So let me show you how we do it. Right, we have the piano roll. Now, this is the original piano part. As you see, every note is written in the piano roll. The velocities are all exactly the same. The only thing I've done ahead of time is color code the left and the right hand. So here's the first thing to think about. If you're writing a piano part that you want to sound like a real piano, don't write something that is impossible to play. So don't have chords that need 20 fingers or sudden leaps. Unless some virtuoso piano player can possibly play 2 octaves apart or three octaves. Maybe not. That would be a struggle. But anyway, if you want it to sound real, make it not impossible to play. And that means you've got a left hand and a right hand, just 2 hands, and 5 fingers on each. In this case, you're only ever hearing 1 note at a time. There aren't any actual chords in this. There's a melody up here and a arpeggio in the left hand. Okay, so once you've written your whole melody down, your piano part down, one of the first things you want to think about is the pedal. So on a real piano or many keyboards, you've got a sustain pedal, which basically holds the notes until you take your foot off the pedal. Now, I'm using a plugin called Easy Keys, and this actually has a programmable pedal. So what I've done in this case, if I show you my playlist, I've got automation, which basically turns the pedal on very quickly after you start playing each phrase. So from here to here is like 1 chord in the harmonic progression. So it makes sense for the pedal to come on at the beginning of that progression and not hold the notes over into the next chord. So it changes every chord. If you have a look now, I've turned that on, you'll be able to see. So that's sustaining the notes for each phrase. If you don't have a VST with a pedal, you can achieve the same effect by literally making every note in each phrase last as long as possible. So it's a bit of a time-consuming thing. If you know a quick way of doing that, please let me know. But you would literally have to drag every note so that it lasts all the way until the same note is played again, and do that for every bar or 2 bars or however long your phrases last. So I'm lucky I've got a pedal, so that's the first step towards making it sound more realistic. We've got sustain. Okay, and then we're going to look at the levels. So the volume level, you've got every single note currently exactly the same volume, which never happens with real instruments. There's always some variation, some more than others. But in a piano, that you want to really sound articulate and dynamic, you need to have quite a lot of variation in the volume of the notes. So this is where it's handy. I've split the left and the right hand because I can now select by color. Now I'm going to use pull downs instead of shortcuts for all of these so you can see what I'm doing. So if you go to select, I think it's Shift C as well if you want to use the shortcut. That'll select by color. Whichever color you've set up here, it'll select all the notes with that color. So I've selected my left hand, and excuse me, I'm going to go through and I'm going to increase the volume of the downbeat. So the very first note for each phrase generally has a bit more power to it, a bit more push behind it, and therefore that's what I'm going to replicate in here. So I'm just going to do it by hand. I'm not going to be incredibly precise. I'm going to do it every couple of, let's call them bars, every couple of groups here. Just going to push the first note in my left hand so it's louder. Notice I'm not going right to the very full volume, and you'll see why in a bit. Got about halfway between where it is and full volume. Now, if you're not worried too much about a bit of repetition, you could, as you're writing, do this and just copy and paste. What happens here? Okay, there's an extra bar in there, so I'm gonna leave a space there. Oh, hit that one. Okay, so that's accented the first note of every bar or two bars or whatever. Then you will also have a little bit, if you think about when you play, you've got a little bit of flow, a little bit of, so you're accenting that first note and then probably accenting a few more notes, though not quite as strongly, and they would be usually on the beat. So if your beat is, let's get back to the beginning. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So the first and third in these are going to have a bit of an accent as well, but not quite as much as the very first one. And notice I'm not being super accurate here. The whole thing about humanization is that it's not robotic. It's not like a machine. It's actually a little bit random, a little bit erratic. So it doesn't matter if these aren't all exactly the same velocity on the downbeats or your accented notes. As long as they're in roughly the same area and they don't sound like they're obviously too loud or too quiet or out of place. This is a bit of a process. If it was easy, then, I wouldn't need to make a tutorial showing you how to do it. So there you go. Right. So now our left hand has a little more variety in the levels, and you could even maybe pull the odd, if you wanted to spend the time just pulling down some of them. No, we'll leave that for now because I'm going to show you something else. So if you listen to that now, you'll find that it's already sounding a little bit more natural. Excuse me. So we've done that on the left hand, and we can also do that on the right hand. So let's pick our color, which is blue. Go to our select bar color. And again, your first note's going to have a bit more power. Now, something to think about with your melody, which is the right hand in this case, is it's likely to be a bit more dynamic. It's likely to have a bit more emotion, a bit more feeling in it. So it's even less likely to have a steady volume if you want it to sound like really human and really emotional and really dynamic. So as well as just putting a little accent on the first note of every bar, it's worth thinking about the actual phrasing and the melody and how they might work dynamically. So I'll just do this and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Put that one in there, put that one. Okay. Got to remember I put an extra bar in the melody here where it goes. So there's an extra bar worth thinking about that. Anyway, so something like this little phrase here. Da, da, da. It can be a little bit more sort of these little passing notes, they could be quite quiet. So really think about how someone would play this and the little differences that make something sound more human. And I'm going to go through, I'm just going to really drop these passing notes and then what happens here? Don't do that. So that could even have a bit, I messed up my selection there. Let's select by color again. It's worth mentioning, the reason I'm selecting by color is so that I'm only changing the velocity of the selected notes. I don't know if you knew that, but when you select a bunch of notes and you start changing stuff down here, the unselected ones don't get touched, which is really handy if you're working with like a left and right hand thing here, as we are. So let's have a bit of a rising thing there. There's another right. So the melody rises, so let's have the same. With the volume. So you're really getting in to the head of your imaginary keyboard player and thinking about how they're going to hit these notes. So there you go. So now I've got a bit more volume variation on the melody. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so that sounds more realistic. Something that isn't quite right, though, is the balance between the left and the right hand. Your melody and your arpeggio in the left hand are still, they're the same kind of, they're occupying the same volume area, and that melody isn't really sticking out. So this is where we can utilize some of the awesome FL Studio tools that are available to us. We're going to select all the left hand. And I'm going to use the scale levels option to drop the volume of the left hand to a sensible level. If we use the offset, then multiply will actually change the gaps between the levels, whereas offset will keep the gaps all the same. So I'm going to use offset in this case. I'm just going to there you go, just put it somewhere where it feels right. And accept. I could, of course, have done the opposite and selected all the right-hand notes and scaled those up. Obviously, you can't go higher than the top volume. But I'm going to leave a little bit of a space at the top for now. Leave everything as it is. So here we go. So now we've got the melody is clearly louder. Everything has a bit more dynamics. You'll be getting bored of this tune. So what else can you do? We can actually add a little bit more variety by selecting everything. And I always do this with keys and also drums if I want them to sound a bit more natural, and literally randomize stuff. So I'm going down, the shortcut is Alt-R, on here, randomize. Now you can see it's already set where I like it to be. So you don't want to randomize your notes because you're going to end up with something like this, which is great if you're a sort of jazz musician or some sort of avant-garde thing going on, but we're not. We want to keep the melody and we want to keep the piano part we've written, because otherwise that would have been a waste of time. What we want to do is randomize the levels just a tiny bit, just to add that little extra element of surprise, bit of variation in there. And you can do that by making sure pattern isn't selected, but levels is, and go to velocity and give it about 5 or 10%. If I didn't have this full screen, you'd be able to see in the little display what I'm selecting, but you can see down here the difference it's making. Notice I've got bipolar clicked, which means it'll randomize both up and down. If you turn that off, then it'll only randomize in the direction that you choose. I'm happy with it being bipolar. It's a good choice of words. So let's just add a touch of randomization there. Just a little bit, just enough. And the seed is actually, all randomization starts with a seed, which is a number, and then it does some sort of mathematics to generate random numbers after that. So if you change that, you're actually randomizing the randomization. And, if you don't like what it looks like the first time around, you can just sort of click through a few times until you get something. But, it's random. Random is random. So I'm quite happy with that. Have a little play. There you go. Click accept, and there you can see. So we've now got a melody which is louder than the left hand. The right hand is louder than the left hand. We've got a lot of variation in the volume levels, but with accented notes on where accented note should be on the downbeat, and we've got a little bit of kind of dynamics, a little bit of articulation to follow the melody to make that kind of thing more interesting. And that is a great start. So that has now, because we've basically dealt with levels purely, and that already sounds a lot more human. If I make a copy, so it'd be interesting to compare this to where we started. So we'll keep the pedal on because that makes a big difference. But if we just make a copy of it, and let's just reset all those levels. can remember how to do that. Yeah, put multiply to 0. Put that there. Okay, so this is where we started. And this is where we are now after about 20 minutes work, but some of that was me talking, so 15 minutes maybe. So original. And with all the volume changes. Hopefully you can hear the difference there. So the next thing that you can do to just give it that little extra bit of human touch is to look at the actual positions in time of the notes. Now this is where we're getting into even more fiddly details, and I'll show you a kind of shortcut, but we'll do it in the long way around first. So, it's good to know. So what I'm talking about is the fact that a human, unlike a robot, usually doesn't play exactly 100% on the beat. So you're usually going to be either a little bit ahead or a little bit behind, probably more often a little bit behind the beat. And that's fine, and that's natural, and that's what makes good music sound interesting when you're talking about like human, people playing guitars and drums and keyboards and stuff like that, as opposed to electronic music where maybe you want everything to be really, really tight and on the beat. Rock and roll doesn't tend to be that tight. It tends to be a little bit loose, or a sort of slow, sad piano thing like we're doing here. So at the moment, everything is bang on the beat. What we can do is literally give random notes a little bit of a nudge. So I think our first note, again, because where the accent is, you're more likely to be on the beat with the first note of each bar or every other bar. But what we can do now, I'm holding control down so that I can get the lasso here. And I'm just going to select notes at random, but missing. I'm not touching the right hand yet either. I'm just going to do the left hand. I'm going to touch I'm going to grab a few notes at random there. Now I'm going to press Control and Shift, and that gives me the lasso, but it doesn't unselect what I had already. So I'm just picking out little chunks of notes from the left hand, sorry. Here we go. Again, the random element is at play here, so I just randomly picked some notes, quite a few at the beginning there. Now, if you zoom right in, you can select, you can pick up those notes and you can move them around. Don't change the pitch because that'll sound awful. If you hold down Alt on your keyboard, it won't lock to the grid, so you can move in tiny little increments. And the closer you're zoomed in, the tinier the increment you can move. So what I like to do is, with these random ones I've selected, give them a little bit of a nudge off the beat. Just a little bit on that one. So there you go. So you can barely see it when you're zoomed out, but those notes are now not quite on the beat. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to pick little random chunks of notes, smaller groups this time maybe, and it'll include some that I just changed and some that I didn't. It's mixing it up. I'm sort of fragmenting and randomizing it. So see, I've managed to choose a few that I chose last time, but not one that I didn't there. So see what happens now. I can, again, hold down Alt, give it a tiny little drag. So the ones that already had a bit of a delay have now got a slightly bigger delay, and the ones that didn't have a tiny delay. And you can do that a few times if you really want to mix it up. I'm just going to do it twice to show you. And the right hand is more likely to be on the beat. What is really good is to have the left and the right hand. If you're going to have any slightly offbeat notes, if they're not played at the same time. So if you've got two notes played at the same time, sorry, I'll be a bit clearer. It actually sounds good if they're not played at exactly the same time. Oops. You actually end up with a little bit of articulation if they... I don't know if you can hear that compared to if they were bang on the beat. It just adds a little bit of extra human sounding delay, a little bit of imperfection. So I'm not going to edit my right hand quite so much, but I am going to give every note except the downbeats a tiny little nudge. Now, do what works for you. Obviously, within the context of the song, some things may work better than others. And there you go. So what we hope to find now is that sounds much more realistic, much more human. Let's have a listen and find out. I changed the note, didn't I? Oh, okay, yeah. Be careful you don't do that. Fortunately, we can undo. Hey, put them back, right. That was close. So yeah, be careful of that one. When you're nudging, try to not change the pitch at the same time because that'll sound really bad. Right. Learn from mistakes. Anyway, let's have a listen to that and see how it sounds now. Excuse me. Okay. To me, that sounds a lot better than what we started with. Which basically sounds like a robot playing the piano. I hope that helps. If that's something you've been trying to do to make your keys sound more realistic, there's a bunch of steps we included there. So first of all, you've got to write stuff that sounds like that's possible. You've got to write stuff that is playable. So if you're on a piano, write for people with 2 hands and 10 fingers. If you're doing drums, don't hit 5 things at once because you can't. Hit one thing at a time. The hi-hat or your crashes. Make it realistic, make it possible. Keep your left and your right hand separate and deal with them separately. Quite often one will be louder than the other and one will carry the melody or the sort of leading notes. Use things like pedals. If you've got a keyboard, same with drums. If you've got a hi-hat, you want to close and open your pedals or your those kind of things. Think about where your accents lie. They'll be on the downbeats, maybe every other every other bar, the first note of every other bar, or every first and third note, depending on what you're working on. So think about where those accents lie, where those louder notes are. And when you've got a melody, make it dynamic. If you've got a rising sort of melody, then rise the volume with it. Put the feeling into it. Imagine that someone with feeling playing it with emotion, and that's what you want to replicate with the volume. And add some randomization. So in FL Studio, you've got the great option to randomize the levels, play around with that. And finally, don't have every note exactly on the beat, because a real person is not a robot and they won't hit every note exactly on the beat. And hopefully that'll help you make stuff sound more human. And that was a half-hour FL Studio tutorial, so I hope I didn't bore you to pieces. I've been Stu, and I'm from DIYmusic.co.uk. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, check out the website, find me on Facebook. There's links in the notes below. Before I go, I'm going to show you just one last helpful little thing. If you've now been through this process and you have humanized a piano, not in that one, yeah. So you've done this. You can actually save that and use it again in a fairly clever way, which again, I love FL Studio for all the functionality that it offers. So this is a bonus lesson for those of you who've stuck around for half an hour. You get an extra couple of minutes. So I'm going to delete my right hand from here. So select by color, get rid of the right hand completely. So I've just got my left hand with all those changes in volume, and let's have our leading note a bit louder there, just because that's the very first one, and the nudges in time. We can use that again. To do that, you can go up here into File and Save Score As. Now, if you save your score, and look in your, so when you're in FL Studio, you'll have like a data folder, and that'll have, is it patches? Yeah. Scores, it'll probably go here automatically actually. So go to scores, and then in your quantization folder, there's a few sort of quantization templates in here that you can use for different kinds of things, but most of them are quite strict. But now we've made this kind of randomly wobbly one, we can save it, and I've done this already. Obviously I prepared, but let's call this Humanized Slow Piano number 2. Okay, so we've saved that, and now if you're working on a different project and you're like, oh, I kind of did this before, and you want to do it again, you can select your the bits you want it to affect. By color again. Color coding stuff is really helpful, by the way. Use it if you're doing this kind of thing. Yeah, and now we can quantize. So if we go to the quantize window, what that normally does is lock stuff to a pretty tight template. But we want to do the opposite. We want to lock it to something a bit looser. So you can go to the File option here, find the one you saved, and you can see straight away the levels and the start times are all changing. So I'll just zoom in so you can see it a little bit clearer. So where we've got like some notes here, let's, I already had them. Select by color, go to quantize or Alt Q, and then find that template. And look, you can see our slightly nudged beats are in there. So say, okay, open that template, sensitivity to the max, start time to the max, so that it actually puts every note in place. Levels, so velocity to the max, or it won't change them at all. And what it's doing is pulling all the the data on the position and velocity from the file you saved earlier. And there you go. You've just like instantly applied the same quantization that you, or the same humanization that you just spent ages doing on one job to another. Oh, let's get in the right place. So there you go. That was a bonus tip for you at the end. I'm going to leave it at that now. I think 35 minutes is long enough to be listening to my voice talking and telling you how to do stuff. Thanks again. I've been Stu from DIYmusic.co.uk. I'll see you around. Have fun. Make some awesome music. Thank you very much.